In 2024, a man named Anton Newtonboom walked across America, barefoot. 3,000 miles, Los Angeles to New York, a Dutch Army veteran who'd come home and fallen into a depression he never saw coming. So, he decided to turn all that pain into a 3,000-mile quest to raise awareness for men's mental health. He calls himself the Barefoot Dutchman, and you can go check him out on the socials. And out of every blister and every lonely mile, here's the one insight he kept coming back to. Brotherhood is the medicine. And that's what I want to talk about today. First, some numbers, because they matter, and because if you're a man who's been quietly carrying this, the numbers themselves might be the first time you hear that you're not the only one. Here's the twist most of the headlines about the men's loneliness epidemic miss. Men don't actually report feeling lonelier than women. The rates are nearly identical, but where we go for support looks very different. According to Pew Research, when a man needs emotional support, he turns to his spouse or partner about as often as anyone, around 3 in 4 of us. But he reaches for a friend far less often than a woman does, 38% of men versus 54% for women. Meanwhile, 15% of men now say they have no close friends at all. That's 5 times what it was in 1990. The share of us with a real circle, 6 or more close friends, has been cut in half over the same stretch. And this isn't just sad. The Surgeon General puts social disconnection in the same health category as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. So here's where I want to challenge the story we keep getting told. The headline word is epidemic, something that happens to you, like weather. And for a lot of men, that framing quietly does the opposite of what it intends. It hands you a role, victim. Something broke, it's not your fault, wait for someone else to fix it. But look again at those numbers. We're not lonelier. We've just stopped reaching for our friends and handed our entire inner life to one person to carry. That's not weather. That's a pattern of choices, made and unmade 1,000 small times. Which sounds like bad news, but is actually the best news in this whole piece, because what you have allowed, you can also change. The steering wheel is still in your hands, bro. So let me say the thing a lot of guys need to hear. When a man tells me, I'm just not the kind of guy who puts himself out there, he thinks he's describing his personality, but really, he's describing his priorities. Picture a spectrum. On one end, passive, and on the other, active. Every one of us lives somewhere on that line for just about everything in our lives. And where we land isn't only a matter of temperament, it's tied to what we value, to what we believe is important. When something matters to us, we move toward the active end without even thinking about it. We take initiative. When something doesn't matter that much to us, we drift toward passive. So when a man writes off his isolation as just how I am, more often than not, he hasn't examined the real issue. He's never once stopped and said out loud, this matters. He's mistaken a value he never knew he could set for a personality he can't change. But here's the freeing part. Your personality is hard to change, but your priorities you can reorder this afternoon. Somewhere along the way, most of us absorbed a lie that connection is a luxury good, a nice to have you'll get around to once the kids are grown, once work calms down, and once life finally settles. But life never settles. And brotherhood was never optional. Humans are purpose-built for connection. We need it the way we need food or oxygen. We treat the one thing we can't actually live without as a someday item, and then wonder why something inside us is starving. Let me tell you about a friend of mine. I'll call my friend Jay. I met Jay at a men's group at church. We ended up at the same table for a book study, and by the end of that first session, we'd agreed to grab coffee. Over that coffee, he told me his marriage was deteriorating. They'd tried counseling, but it hadn't really taken. There were young kids in the mix, and his job situation was tenuous. And he said something I've never forgotten. He said he'd looked at himself in the mirror and realized that if his marriage went sideways, he didn't have a single person nearby to lean on. So he did something about it. He walked into that men's group on purpose with the specific stated intent of making friends. And that's the whole move right there. He named what mattered and he took the first step. So I invited him to ride with my other crew, a cadre of hooligans who go ride bikes most weekends and then break bread together after. Jay said yes. His first ride happened to be on a winter morning in Phoenix, so it's like 5:30 a.m. It's pitch black, temperature in the 40s. and he's rolling out along canal paths with a bunch of guys he had just met. The sunrise was just starting to glow by the time we got back to the coffee shop. And then came breakfast and our initiation. We call it the Inquisition, and we fire every none of your business question we can think of at the new guy, not to haze him, but to draw out his story. It's an invitation to be known, and most men have never had one. Jay was forthright, and he told us his story, and at the end, we gave him the thumbs up. That was nearly a decade ago, and he's been one of us ever since. Here's why I'm telling you this. Jay assembled his crew before the storm hit. And when his marriage did finally come apart years later, he wasn't left drowning on his own. His brothers were already there to help hold him up. And a couple of years later, when my marriage dissolved, Jay was one of the men who helped keep me from drowning. I want to point something out because I think it's important. The brotherhood didn't save Jay's marriage, and it didn't save mine. Brotherhood is not a force field. It will not keep the hard things from happening. What it does is this. It makes sure that when the storm hits, and it will, you are not the only one in the boat. Brotherhood does not cure the disease of being alive. It just means you don't have to face the worst of it by yourself. One important thing about which boat to climb into. When I say go find your people, I do not mean a club or a bar. I don't mean a room where the conversation never rises above favorite drinks and old conquests. That's just a louder way to hide. I mean men who will sharpen you and build you up. Camaraderie and accountability. Guys you can do things with, ride, build, serve, work, and do life with. The men who will sit in the hard conversation and help you walk through the storm instead of helping you pretend it isn't raining. So here's where I'll leave you. 2 honest questions. So first, be real with yourself. Is I'm not the type actually true, or is it just a priority you've never set? And where does real friendship rank in your life right now? And where do you want it to? Sit with those. Then give yourself permission, and I mean that word, permission, to call this what it is, essential. Not a luxury. Move it up the list and do it out loud. And then take one step, just one. Pick one good room and show up this week. Text the guy you keep meaning to text. Say yes to the thing you keep declining. Walk into the group the way Jay did, scared and unsure and going anyway. It won't all come together at once, and it doesn't have to, but doing something beats doing nothing every single time. Then show up again and keep showing up. Because this matters more than most of us ever gave ourselves permission to believe. We need each other, guys. We always have. If this hit home, let me know in the comments and send it to a man you'd want in your boat. It might be the nudge he's waiting for. And if you want to go deeper on building the kind of life and connection that can weather anything, my book, Surfing the Invisible Wave, is available now. You can find out all about it at invisiblewave.surf.